They say money can buy anything except loyalty and the sanctity of a vow. In a world where power, greed, and vanity shape destinies, one man dared to gamble his family's future for a fleeting thrill. This is the story of Charles Farnsworth, a multimillionaire whose unquenchable thirst for excitement led him to shatter the very foundations of the life he built. While his pregnant wife lay alone in a hospital bed, Charles jetted off with his mistress on a lavish baby moon, leaving behind a storm of secrets, heartbreak, and betrayals that no amount of wealth could contain. Prepare yourself for the scandal of a lifetime. Charles Farnsworth was born into a life of relative comfort in San Francisco. His parents, Catherine and Arnold Farnsworth, ran a boutique business dealing with rare art prints. The Farnsworths weren't extraordinarily wealthy, but they enjoyed fine dinners, exotic vacations, and quality education for Charles. From an early age, he watched how art collectors, patrons, and investors gravitated to his father's charismatic style. Arnold had a knack for charming clients into spending thousands on a single print, leaving them convinced they had secured a masterpiece that would appreciate in value. Young Charles was mesmerized by the gleaming opulence of the auction houses. He dreamed of living an even grander life, one where no constraint would hold him back. As he came of age, Charles displayed a natural gift for numbers and negotiations. He excelled in school, particularly in debate clubs and entrepreneurial contests. By the time he was accepted into Stanford University, he was brimming with self-confidence and ambition. It was there he met Oliver Greenwood, a billionaire heir, known for being the nephew of a certain tech mogul, rumored to have ties with the likes of Elon Musk. Oliver's family name was practically minted in gold, and his presence at Stanford opened the door to exclusive circles of wealth, power, and influence. Oliver took an immediate liking to Charles, recognizing in him a kindred spirit, hungry cunning, and unafraid to bend rules. Their friendship led Charles to encounters that most people could only dream of. From private soirees in Napa Valley wineries to backstage access at exclusive festivals, Charles found himself plunged into a lifestyle beyond anything he had experienced. He thrived absorbing new business ideas and forging alliances with influential people. By the time he graduated, Charles had his eyes set on starting his own venture capital firm. With Oliver's backing, he quickly grew his firm into a powerhouse known for acquiring high-risk tech startups that often turned enormous profits. Yet with success came arrogance. Charles Farnsworth developed an insatiable hunger for more fame, more fortune, and more control over everything he touched. He was determined to carve a name for himself, a name that would eclipse even the Greenwood legacy. Little did he know this path would lead him down a road paved with moral compromise, a fractured family, and a scandal he could never outrun. Before the headlines and the scandal, Charles Farnsworth lived a simpler life. While at Stanford, he wasn't always the suave, impeccably dressed financier the world would later know. He was once the awkward undergrad who fumbled during public speaking and wore the same pair of khakis for days. Still, even in those humble days, he was never short of confidence. He believed wholeheartedly that destiny had something grand in store for him. One of his earliest mentors was Dr. Penelope Zhao, a revered economics professor with a reputation for grooming future millionaires and Nobel laureates. She recognized Charles's ambition and taught him the subtle difference between ambition and greed. One built empires for the greater good, while the other left a trail of broken people. Charles absorbed her lessons, but selectively. He focused on the parts about building wealth and influence, often dismissing or reinterpreting the cautionary tales about letting arrogance overtake one's conscience. It wasn't that Charles was a bad person. In fact, during these formative years, he volunteered at local shelters, helped class project teams succeed, and had a smile for everyone. But beneath that helpful exterior was an undercurrent, a belief that the world was his oyster, that every experience and person he encountered could be leveraged for personal gain. His social life was vibrant. He dated a few women, though most of these relationships fizzled out due to his single-minded focus on career building. It was only upon meeting Adriana Farnsworth, then Adriana Shaw, a bright, compassionate young woman majoring in creative writing, that Charles began to consider a serious long-term partnership. Adriana's gentle soul was the perfect balance to Charles's restless ambition. She saw the kindness within him, the part that still remembered to donate to charity and help friends when they stumbled. She softened his edges, introducing him to the idea that true happiness wasn't found solely in towering achievements, but also in the simple joys of daily life. As their relationship deepened, they shared laughter on spontaneous road trips along the California coast, swapped stories at hole-in-the-wall diners, and planned a future together that wove both of their dreams into one. Their early years were touched by hope, and Charles often joked with Adriana that once he became a millionaire, he'd buy her a castle on the cliffs of Big Sur. She would laugh and say she only needed a simple home filled with love. That promise of love was real, yet the seeds of tragedy had already taken root. Charles's thirst for success wouldn't be quenched by a quiet life, and the path he forged would soon test their bond like nothing else. After Stanford, Charles wasted no time in building his empire. Fueled by Oliver Greenwood's seed money and his own remarkable tenacity, Charles launched Farnsworth Capital, a venture capital fund specializing in cutting-edge technologies. The firm got off to a rocky start as Charles learned the hard way that not every startup dream turns into a unicorn. But soon enough, he sniffed out the golden opportunities software solutions, tackling data security, biotech companies, researching revolutionary treatments, and artificial intelligence ventures on the brink of changing entire industries. His first major win came when Farnsworth Capital sold its shares in a cybersecurity startup to a tech giant. This acquisition catapulted Charles into the ranks of the multimillionaires, placing him in the spotlight of Silicon Valley. Journalists began to note his financial moves. Older, more established investors sought him out as a young prodigy. Suddenly, Charles Farnsworth was a name uttered in the same breath as the region's biggest whales. As the money rolled in Charles's lifestyle, elevated to match, he swapped his modest sedan for a sleek Tesla, upgraded his cramped apartment to a luxury condo in Nob Hill, and filled his closet with tailor-made suits. Adriana watched all this with a mix of pride and apprehension. She admired his drive, but worried about the subtle shifts in his character, the phone calls at midnight, the hush-hush deals, and the rare weekends he was actually home. She tried to stand by him, reminding him of life's simple pleasures and the value of genuine connections. Yet her voice often went unheard amid the roar of success. To handle the growing empire, Charles created a leadership team of brilliant but cutthroat executives. He leaned heavily on his CFO Richard Stein, a man with a reputation for creative accounting. Rumors swirled that Farnsworth Capital was pushing legal boundaries, making deals in morally gray areas, and profiting from questionable partnerships. But in the high-stakes world of venture capital, success was measured by results, not by the morality of the deals. During these formative years of Farnsworth Capital, Charles often found himself at extravagant parties in Los Angeles and Palm Beach, rubbing shoulders with movie stars, politicians, and fellow moguls. Clinking champagne glasses with them, he felt unstoppable. The notion of playing by the rules seemed almost quaint. Charles believed that so long as profits soared, his ethical misgivings would remain safely out of sight. He had a loyal wife, supportive friends, and the Midas touch for business. But every empire has cracks in its foundation, some visible, some hidden. And as Charles climbed the pinnacle of success, each step up also loosened a piece of the moral ground beneath him. Adriana Farnsworth was a far cry from the typical trophy wife stereotype often found by the arms of the newly wealthy. A soft-spoken woman with warm hazel eyes and a penchant for wearing simple sundresses, she carried an air of quiet sophistication. Though she was often overshadowed by Charles's flamboyant business persona, Adriana shone in her own right. She worked at a non-profit literacy program, dedicating her time to underprivileged youth in the Bay Area. Many evenings, she came home late, covered in chalk dust and brimming with heart-warming stories about her students who affectionately called her Ms. A. From the outside, Adriana and Charles seemed the perfect couple, a philanthropic, socially conscious wife and a successful venture capitalist husband. Their public images complemented each other. Her gentle philanthropic efforts balanced out the more aggressive capitalism that powered Farnsworth Capital. There were invites to high-profile events, photos splashed across tabloids, and interviews that captured the family angle, painting Charles as a man deeply supported by his loving wife. But behind the scenes, Adriana wrestled with unspoken loneliness. The dinners once filled with laughter turned into silent affairs, Charles often buried in his phone or off at another networking event. She made efforts to be part of his world, attending tech conferences, hosting charitable galas that brought Farnsworth Capital good Still, she found herself questioning if Charles was even the same man she married. The question of starting a family was a recurring topic. Adriana yearned for children, imagining their child's laughter echoing in a warm, cozy home. Charles, while not opposed, always seemed to find reasons to delay. "Let's wait until the next deal closes, or we should ensure the business is stable first." Eventually, he relented, but with a hint of reluctance. After 2 long years of trying, Adriana finally became pregnant. She was ecstatic, believing that motherhood would unite them in a shared purpose, and perhaps rekindle the love that had dulled under the weight of deadlines and deals. A new hope filled their mansion in San Francisco's Pacific Heights neighborhood. Adriana decorated the nursery in soft yellows and greens, carefully selecting plush toys and baby blankets. She glowed at the thought of bringing new life into their home, eagerly imagining Charles's delight in teaching their son or daughter about the wonders of the world. But the reality of her pregnancy would soon collide with Charles's unstoppable quest for luxury and excitement. The cracks in their marriage would only deepen, culminating in a betrayal that would leave Adriana questioning everything she had once believed. Where Adriana was gentle and understated, Cassandra Cassie Delacroix was bold, fiery, and unabashedly ambitious. She moved to San Francisco from Miami, with aspirations of becoming a social media influencer, quickly discovering that marketing beauty products and staging exotic travel posts could catapult one into the limelight. A chance meeting at a tech launch party introduced her to Charles Farnsworth. She was used to attention from wealthy men, but Charles had an aura about him, an infectious confidence that left everyone around him gravitating to his stories of triumph and power. Cassie's Instagram was filled with snapshots of her life sipping cocktails on rooftop bars, posing by luxury sports cars, and flaunting designer handbags that were gifted or sponsored by admirers. At first, Charles brushed off her flirtatious compliments, but as the weeks rolled on, Her presence became a thrilling escape from the responsibilities at home. He didn't intend for it to become an affair, but a spark flickered into a flame fed by secret text messages, stolen weekends in Napa, and the intoxicating sense of living life on the edge. For Cassie, the affair was more than just physical attraction. She saw in Charles the potential to catapult herself into the highest circles of influence. Doors that had once been shut to her suddenly creaked open. Invites to exclusive events, endorsements from high-profile brands. These became her new reality, as Charles flaunted his money to impress her. She found herself addicted to the power that came with being on the arm of a multimillionaire. Meanwhile, Charles indulged in the illusion of having it all, a respectable family life, and a daring liaison that heightened his sense of control over his destiny. Their affair escalated when Cassie accidentally discovered Charles had a pregnant wife. Instead of scaring her away, the revelation seemed to galvanize her ambition. While a part of Cassie felt uneasy about hurting another woman, her desire for wealth and fame overwhelmed any guilt she might have felt. She told herself that if Charles was willing to cheat, that was his moral failing, not hers. The clandestine relationship took on a life of its own, marked by whispered phone calls, coded messages, and a series of lavish gifts, diamond bracelets, first-class flights, and weekend getaways in St. Barthélemy. Charles never once thought about the eventual consequences. He believed he could keep the world separate, that as long as he played the role of supportive husband in public, no one would suspect a thing. In the city of shimmering bay views and billion-dollar dreams, the line between right and wrong blurred in Charles Farnsworth's mind. And little did he know, the cost of his duplicity would one day come crashing down on him, threatening to destroy everything he had worked so hard to achieve. A baby moon is usually a romantic getaway for expecting parents, one last hurrah before diapers, midnight feedings, and the beautiful chaos of a newborn become the center of their world. Adriana had fantasized about such a trip with Charles. She pictured them strolling on a secluded beach, hands entwined, reconnecting in the serenity of nature before the arrival of their child. But as her second trimester rolled in, Charles's schedule became too hectic, he claimed. Whenever she brought up the idea, he countered with excuses about pending acquisitions and negotiations. What Adriana didn't know was that Charles was indeed going on a baby moon, but with Cassie. Under the guise of a last-minute business trip to Europe, he whisked Cassie away to a private resort in Santorini, Greece. He arranged everything in secret, from the 5-star suite, perched on a cliff overlooking the Aegean Sea, to the candlelit dinners at exclusive oceanfront restaurants. Cassie relished every moment, posting Instagram stories featuring sunsets and gourmet meals, though she carefully cropped out any hint of Charles. Her captions teased of a mystery man who was spoiling her rotten, fueling gossip among her followers and leaving them guessing. Charles tried to push all thoughts of Adriana from his mind as he lounged by infinity pools with Cassie sipping chilled champagne under the scorching Greek sun. In those stolen moments he felt untouchable, as if the moral lines blurred into the horizon. Each time he felt a twinge of guilt, he reminded himself of the relentless demands he faced at Farnsworth Capital, the constant stress of staying on top of the competitive tech market. I deserve this escape, he would tell himself, even while ignoring the fact that his wife was back in San Francisco coping with pregnancy complications and hospital visits alone. As Charles posted pictures of business dinners on his social media, carefully staged to show him at conference tables or with Greek executives, Adriana scrolled through them at home, trying to shrug off the uneasy feeling that his stories didn't add up. She fought to trust him after all they had come so far together, and their child was soon to be born. but illusions can only last so long. The cracks were already showing, and as Charles revelled in the grandeur of a baby moon with his mistress, he unwittingly set the stage for a public and personal catastrophe that would shake everyone involved. The final straw would come when Adriana's health took a dire turn, and Charles's carefully constructed facade began to crumble like sand under the Aegean tides. Back in San Francisco, Adriana was in her 3rd trimester, her belly a visible testament to the life growing inside her. One morning, she felt an intense stabbing pain in her abdomen. Alarmed, she rushed to the hospital, suspecting complications. The doctors quickly admitted her to monitor her condition. Fear clung to her like a blanket. She tried calling Charles, but his phone went straight to voicemail. It was afternoon in California, but well past midnight in Santorini. No matter how many messages she left, she couldn't reach him. She called Farnsworth Capital's headquarters, only to be informed by a terse executive assistant that Charles was currently overseas on urgent business and could not be disturbed. Panicked and alone, Adriana reached out to her family who lived 2 hours away. Her mother and sister, both distraught, joined her at the hospital as doctors ran tests to ensure the baby was safe. Days went by with Adriana stuck in a sterile hospital room. Charles remained unreachable, except for a short text that read, "Busy with critical deals. Please hold tight. I'll be back soon." The curt message felt like a dagger to her already raw emotions. She tried to remain calm for the baby, telling herself that Charles must be in an important negotiation. Yet she couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that something was off. Meanwhile, the hospital buzzed around her nurses, changing IV drips, doctors stepping in to ask about her stress levels. They advised her to rest and avoid unnecessary anxiety for the baby's sake. But how could she not worry when her husband was MIA at such a crucial time? Adriana's mother, Evelyn Shaw, fumed at Charles's absence. She had always harbored doubts about her son-in-law's priorities, though she seldom voiced them. Now she watched her daughter's eyes brim with tears as Adriana stared at the phone, waiting for a reply that never came. Evelyn confronted one of Farnsworth Capital's junior executives, demanding to know how Charles could possibly leave his pregnant wife alone. She received only vague apologies and half-hearted reassurances that Mr. Farnsworth will return as soon as he can. In that moment, as Adriana lay in a hospital bed, her unborn child's heartbeat echoing steadily on the monitor, she felt her perfect world teetering on the edge. Doubt overwhelmed her. She had once believed that love could withstand anything. But love, she was beginning to realize, sometimes isn't enough when faced with deep-rooted deceit and betrayal. Charles returned from Greece, tan-relaxed and entirely unprepared for the storm awaiting him. The morning after his arrival, he walked into the Farnsworth Capital office, only to be met with tense stares from his staff. An intern awkwardly passed him an envelope containing urgent messages from Adriana's mother, Evelyn. Alarm shot through him as he read about the hospital visits. His stomach churned with guilt. He rushed to the hospital, mind racing with excuses. Maybe he'd say his phone was lost, or there was an international issue with roaming. None of it could erase the fact that he had not only failed to be there for Adriana during a potentially life-threatening episode, but had also lied about the nature of his trip. When he walked into Adriana's room, her eyes brimmed with tears. She didn't leap into his arms. Instead, she asked in a tremulous voice, "Where were you?" He stumbled over an explanation about Europe deals and phone troubles, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. Her gaze was icy, a stark contrast to the gentle look she once reserved only for him. Adriana's mother stood by her side, fury bristling from her every pore. You abandoned her in the hospital. Charles, Evelyn said, her voice quiet, but filled with accusation. Is there something else you need to tell us? He glanced around, nervously, aware that Adriana, her mother, and the nurses were awaiting an answer. For a moment, he considered confessing everything about Cassie, about the trip, that was anything but business. But fear won out. He muttered something about an urgent acquisition, about top-secret negotiations, that left him in a communications blackout. It was a flimsy lie, one that no one in the room seemed to believe. However, Adriana was too exhausted physically and emotionally to confront him fully. The revelation began slowly, like a poison seeping into the air. Over the next few days, whispers in the hospital corridor suggested that Charles had been seen in Greece with a young model. A paparazzo's leaked photo found its way to an online gossip site, blurry but unmistakably Charles with an unidentified woman on a catamaran. Adriana's sister discovered it while browsing social media. The uneasy hush that fell over the hospital room when she showed Adriana the photo was deafening. Though not definitive, the photo was enough to spark an irreversible suspicion in Adriana's mind. This was the first real glimpse of the truth, and it threatened to shatter her heart and the fragile sense of stability she clung to. Charles, though cornered stubbornly, denied any wrongdoing. But a single photograph often speaks louder than 1,000 denials, and the seeds of doubt had been firmly planted. When Adriana was finally discharged from the hospital, she insisted on returning to their mansion in Pacific Heights, determined to confront Charles in private. She needed answers, no more half-baked excuses. Charles sensed her resolve the moment she walked through the front door. She was no longer the meek gentlewoman who avoided conflict for fear of upsetting him. She was an expectant mother, fighting for the survival of her family. They ended up in the living room, large bay windows overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge. Adriana stood near the window, a silent silhouette against the afternoon sun, as Charles tried to spin his latest story. I swear, Adriana, the woman in that photo was just a business associate. The yacht was an impromptu networking event. People do that sort of thing in Europe all the time. He tried to meet her eyes, but she refused to look at him. With trembling hands, she held up her phone, displaying a social media post from Cassie, a romantic dinner in Santorini, followed by a blurred reflection of Charles in the wine glass. Is this the same business associate? Adriana's voice cracked, tears welling up. She had gone through every post on Cassie's profile, matching timestamps with Charles's location. The evidence was damning. At last, cornered beyond retreat, Charles's shoulders sagged. He attempted to justify his actions, claiming he felt overwhelmed and sought an escape to manage stress. He pleaded for understanding. I never wanted to hurt you, Adriana. It was a mistake, I swear. His words sounded desperate, hollow. Adriana's anger flared through the tears. A mistake. You left me alone in a hospital bed to go gallivanting around the world with another woman. You don't get to dismiss that as a simple mistake. She slammed her phone on the coffee table, her frustration sizzling in the space between them. For the first time, Charles truly saw the devastation he had wrought. Adriana carrying their child was not just hurt. She was furious, betrayed, and deeply resentful. The magnitude of his betrayal rattled him. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. I can't do this right now. You need to leave, she said, voice heavy with finality. Her words cut through him, leaving him feeling a rare sense of shame. He gathered a few clothes and left for a hotel, his world suddenly feeling empty. As he shut the door behind him, the echo reverberated like the crashing walls of a once grand empire. all of his wealth and power, couldn't shield him from the raw, piercing reality of his choices. The wife he once cherished was slipping through his fingers, and the unborn child he had so callously disregarded was now the only thing tethering him to a semblance of responsibility. News of Charles's affair spread like wildfire through both high society circles and the online world. The leaked photo from Santorini turned into a minor tabloid sensation. Cassie, reveling in her newfound fame, dropped not-so-subtle hints across her social media, fueling the scandal with cryptic posts like, "He treats me like the queen I am," and "When the heart wants what it wants." Suddenly her follower count soared and gossip websites buzzed about the possibility of a full interview or a tell-all. At Farnsworth Capital, whispers grew louder. Investors began questioning Charles's judgment and stability, worried that the scandal would tarnish the firm's reputation. Oliver Greenwood distanced himself quietly, removing references to his partnership with Charles from press releases. To the public, Farnsworth Capital tried to maintain a polished facade, releasing statements about an ongoing commitment to innovative ventures while ignoring the personal drama swirling around its CEO. Adriana, meanwhile, found herself besieged by reporters camped outside the mansion. The constant barrage of camera flashes and shouted questions left her feeling claustrophobic and anxious. She retreated inside, refusing to give interviews. Her only concerns were her unborn baby and the reality that her husband's betrayal had permanently altered her life's trajectory. She received support from friends, her mother and her sister, but nothing could fully alleviate the heartbreak gnawing at her. As if the scandal wasn't enough, Adriana's obstetrician warned her about the risks of high blood pressure and stress on the pregnancy. She was urged to stay calm and avoid triggers. Yet every day brought a new wave of humiliating headlines or rumors about Cassie. Even long-time family friends like the philanthropic couple James and Lydia Crawford called to express their shock and concern, suggesting that Adriana might seek a divorce for her own well-being. Charles's attempts to make amends were clumsy at best. He tried to send flowers, stuffed animals for the baby, and handwritten apologies. He even left a long-winded voicemail, pledging to end things with Cassie and be the husband and father you deserve. But Adriana was numb. Words meant little when weighed against the memory of him stepping off a plane from Greece, looking tanned and carefree, while she had been lying in a hospital bed, terrified about their child's health. The world now saw Charles as a callous playboy, but the man behind the headlines felt like he was losing everything he loved. In a desperate bid to salvage his life, he began to scheme a path forward, one that might redeem him in the eyes of his investors, the media, and most importantly, Adriana. Whether redemption was even possible, however, remained an open question. When the news reached the Farnsworths, Charles's parents, Catherine and Arnold, they were aghast. Despite their own disapproval of Charles's relentless pursuit of wealth, they had never imagined he could stray so far from the values they had tried to instill. Catherine, in particular, was devastated. She had grown close to Adriana, seeing in her the daughter she never had. She was incensed at Charles for his betrayal, feeling partially responsible, as though she had failed him in some crucial moral lesson. Catherine reached out to Adriana, directly offering support and a place to stay if needed. "I know my son can be selfish," she said gently over the phone. "But please remember that we consider you family no matter what." Adriana broke down, crying. It comforted her to know that Charles's parents were in her corner, but it also pained her to see how fractured everything had become. Meanwhile, Charles's father, Arnold, confronted him in a heated phone call. "You've dragged our name through the mud," Arnold growled. "You can't just treat a marriage like another business venture you can offload when it's inconvenient." Charles tried to rationalize his actions, blaming the pressures of Farnsworth Capital, but Arnold would have none of it. "Stop making excuses, son. If you lose Adriana, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Adriana's side of the family wasn't silent either. Her mother, Evelyn, openly advocated for a divorce. "He's shown his true colors, my dear," she told Adriana one evening. "Better you protect yourself and the baby than hope he'll change." Evelyn had her own experiences with heartbreak, a failed marriage with Adriana's father, and she didn't want her daughter to endure the same emotional torment. Despite the mounting pressure from both families, Adriana was torn. She still loved Charles on some level. After all, they had shared dreams of growing old together, raising their children and creating a home filled with laughter. But the pain of betrayal lingered like a festering wound that refused to heal. Each time she thought she might forgive him, images of Cassie's Instagram posts flashed in her mind. For Charles, facing the anger and disappointment from both sets of parents brought him a rare moment of clarity. If he was to fix this at all, if that was even possible, he needed to do more than issue hollow apologies. The question was whether he had the courage to truly change, or if his addiction to power and indulgence would carry him too far away from the family he claimed to cherish. Adriana's mother, Evelyn, decided it was time for an intervention. If Adriana was too emotionally drained to confront Charles again, Evelyn would do it herself. She arranged a meeting in a quiet cafe outside the city, instructing Charles to come alone, leaving behind the usual entourage of assistants and bodyguards. Charles arrived looking gaunt, dark circles under his eyes, betraying his restless nights. As soon as he sat down, Evelyn fixed him with a piercing gaze. "My daughter's life is in turmoil because of you," she said, sipping her tea calmly. "If you truly love her, you need to prove it." Charles shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had prepared 1,000 excuses, 1,000 reassurances. But Evelyn cut him off before he could speak. "Don't even try to blame business stress or your upbringing. This is about your moral compass. Adriana deserves better, and I won't stand by if you're going to continue your affair or keep lying." Drawing in a deep breath, Charles finally spoke. "I ended it with Cassie. I told her it was over, that I want to be there for my wife and child." He paused, his voice trembling slightly. "I know I messed up beyond measure, but I don't want to lose Adriana." Evelyn studied him, looking for any sign of sincerity. "Words are cheap, Charles," she replied bluntly. "You know what Adriana has gone through. Are you prepared to take responsibility, to face the media, your investors, and everyone else you've let down?" Charles nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes. I plan to publicly address this. I'll hold a press conference if I must. I need to show Adriana and our child that I'm not walking away from my responsibilities." Evelyn allowed a slight softening in her expression. "Adriana is considering legal separation," she informed him. "She's spoken with a lawyer. But I want you to know I've told her to make that decision with a clear mind, free of her current stress levels. If you're sincere, you have a narrow window to convince her to give you another chance. Don't waste it." Charles felt a small flicker of hope. He had the faint sense that if he truly changed, cut ties with Cassie, toned down his unscrupulous business dealings, and became the husband Adriana deserved, he might still salvage his marriage. Yet, as Evelyn gathered her purse and left, an uneasy voice echoed in his mind. Was he truly ready to put family above everything else, including the temptations and power plays he had come to love? Even as Charles began taking the first steps toward redemption, the crisis at Farnsworth Capital escalated. Negative press over his scandalous personal life threatened investor confidence. A major client, the venture arm of a global pharmaceutical giant, was on the verge of pulling out. Stockholders grumbled about a CEO whose priorities seemed tangled in salacious headlines rather than smart business moves. At an emergency board meeting, Oliver Greenwood attended via video call. Once a close friend, now he regarded Charles with a mixture of disappointment and frustration. "We can't have Farnsworth Capital's name dragged through every tabloid in the country," Oliver said coldly. "Your personal life is jeopardizing this firm's future." Charles bristled, but managed to keep his composure. He presented a plan. He would step back from day-to-day operations temporarily to focus on personal matters and allow the board to appoint an interim CEO. Meanwhile, the PR team would orchestrate a careful narrative Charles Farnsworth as a man who recognized his mistakes and was seeking to restore family and business integrity. The board grudgingly approved, albeit with skepticism. In the halls of Farnsworth Capital, staff eyed Charles warily. Some whispered that he was only saving face. Others felt a twinge of sympathy. After all, many of them had admired him for his quick intelligence and rags-to-riches story. Seeing him brought low by a scandal felt almost tragic, like a Shakespearean hero undone by his own fatal flaw. In the midst of all this, Cassie was doing her best to cling to relevance. She made vague statements about being betrayed by someone powerful and threatened to release private text messages unless Charles compensated her. It was a thinly veiled attempt at blackmail, hoping to squeeze more money or attention from him. Charles ignored her calls, having already deposited a substantial sum in her account as a final gesture to end their affair. She was an unwelcome loose end he desperately needed to sever. Meanwhile, Adriana found herself in an emotional maelstrom. On one hand, she was relieved that Charles was finally showing some willingness to mend his ways, stepping back from his corporate throne to work on their marriage. On the other, the memory of his betrayal was fresh, and the fear of further heartbreak gnawed at her heart. Her pregnancy was inching closer to term, and she had to decide if Charles would be by her side in the delivery room or if she'd rely solely on her mother and sister. The crisis at Farnsworth Capital mirrored the upheaval in Charles's personal life. Both realms teetered precariously, reliant on his ability to choose an authentic path forward. As lines blurred between corporate responsibility and emotional accountability, the stakes only grew higher. One misstep, and everything could come crashing down. The days following Cassie's final threats passed in a blur of tension and fragile hope. Charles moved back into the mansion, but not into their shared bedroom. He occupied the guest suite on the lower floor, a self-imposed exile symbolizing both his remorse and his willingness to rebuild trust slowly. Adriana allowed it, but made her boundaries clear. No expectations, no pressure, and no attempts to rewrite the past with sweet words. Charles accepted these terms with humility. Gone was the cocky venture capitalist who had once charmed entire boardrooms. In his place stood a man stripped of illusion, desperate to reclaim the life he'd nearly destroyed. He began each morning with simple tasks, preparing Adriana's tea, watering the nursery plants, and reading parenting books cover to cover. He asked to join her on doctor's visits, not to be seen, but to show her he cared enough to witness her discomfort, her bravery, her sacrifice. At first, Adriana watched all of this with cautious detachment. Was this just another performance? A bid to buy forgiveness, the way Charles once bought luxury lavishly and without true cost to himself? But something was different. He didn't just show up. He stayed. He didn't argue when she snapped at him. Didn't retreat behind excuses or business jargon. Instead, he listened absorbed, and slowly, painfully, he began to change. He hired an interior designer Adriana trusted to complete the nursery, following every detail. She wanted a hand-painted mural of ocean waves, a rocking chair in soft cream, and shelves filled with children's books they once dreamed of reading together. When he saw her struggling to lift a basket of laundry, he didn't wait to be asked. He simply took it from her hands, apologizing for every moment she had carried burdens alone. Meanwhile, the business world kept its distance. Charles had formally stepped down from day-to-day operations at Farnsworth Capital, handing over the reins to interim CEO Helena Worth, a woman known for turning troubled firms around with quiet but unshakable competence. Investors were appeased by her presence. The media attention began to shift, and a new scandal involving a Hollywood actor took over the tabloids, granting Charles a brief but vital reprieve. Oliver Greenwood, ever the pragmatic ally, called Charles one late afternoon. "You're doing the right thing," he said, voice gruff. "Just remember, people are watching. One slip and it all comes undone again." Charles took those words to heart. He deleted Cassie's number, blocked her on every platform, and instructed his legal team to document her previous threats in case she resurfaced. The past would not be allowed to bleed into this fragile new chapter he was trying to write. One evening, Charles found Adriana sitting on the patio, cradling her belly as she watched the sun dip into the bay. He hesitated before approaching. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. She nodded without a word. For a while they sat in silence, the air thick with unspoken thoughts. Then softly, Adriana said, "I used to picture our baby growing up in a home filled with love and laughter. I still want that, but I don't know if I can have it with you." Charles's throat tightened. "You don't owe me anything," he said, "but I want to earn back what I threw away. Not with promises, just actions." He paused, then added, "I made a lot of terrible choices. I thought I was chasing freedom, but I was running from responsibility. I let power define me. And when I finally looked around, the only thing that mattered, you were slipping through my fingers." Adriana blinked away tears, but didn't look at him. Instead, she whispered, "Do you even know what it felt like? Lying in that hospital bed, thinking you might not show up at all." "I do now," Charles replied, voice breaking, "and I'll never forgive myself for it." Another long silence followed. But this time, it wasn't filled with distance. It was the stillness of two people standing on the edge of something uncertain, maybe not reconciliation, but recognition. A shared acknowledgement that pain could coexist with love, and that redemption required more than just apologies. Later that night, Adriana called him into the nursery. She had been assembling a mobile for the crib, tiny hand-stitched animals dangling from wooden arms. "Can you hang it for me?" she asked quietly. He did clumsily at first, but she smiled faintly when he managed it. As he adjusted the last thread, Adriana placed a hand on her belly and gasped. "She kicked," she said, softly. Charles dropped to his knees beside her, eyes wide. "Can I?" She took his hand and guided it gently. There it was, a flutter, a push, a miracle in motion. Tears filled Charles's eyes. "Hi there," he whispered. "I'm your dad, and I promise I'll never let you down again." Adriana didn't speak, but her fingers lingered in his for a moment longer than necessary, and that more than any grand apology was enough to give Charles hope. It happened on a grey Tuesday afternoon. The clouds loomed over Pacific Heights, casting long shadows across the manicured hedges and marble entryways. Adriana had just returned from a doctor's appointment, tired but calm when the doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting visitors. When she opened the door, the last person she wanted to see was standing there. Cassandra Delacroix in a fitted trench coat. Sunglasses perched on her forehead, eyes glinting with desperation and fury. Her perfectly contoured face looked slightly hollowed, and the sleek aura she once projected was now tinged with chaos. "We need to talk," Cassie said sharply, brushing past Adriana without waiting for permission. Adriana, stunned for a moment, instinctively closed the door behind her. Her baby kicked in protest, and she cradled her stomach protectively. "You're not welcome here," she said, her voice firm, despite the shock pounding through her chest. Cassie turned on her heel in the foyer, the grandeur of the Farnsworth mansion not lost on her. "I'm not here to fight you," she said, although her tone betrayed her. "I'm here for him," as if summoned. Charles stepped into the hallway, his expression stiffening the moment he saw her. "Cassie," he said through clenched teeth, "you need to leave, now." "I'm not going anywhere until I'm heard," she snapped. "I kept your secrets. I protected your reputation. And now my name is garbage on every blog. Every brand deal I had is gone, and I'm being called a home wrecker by people who don't know half the story." Charles shook his head. "We had an agreement. I made sure you were compensated. We're done." Cassie stepped closer, her voice lowering into something venomous. "I want more. You owe me more. You promised me a life, Charles. You said I was more than just an affair. And now you're playing house with her again, like none of it happened." Adriana's stomach twisted. She could barely believe the audacity. But instead of retreating to let Charles handle it, she stepped between them. "You come into my home," she said, voice rising after everything you've done, and you try to blackmail your way into more money. Cassie faltered for a second. "I'm not blackmailing anyone," she lied unconvincingly. "I'm just making sure I don't get left with nothing after giving 2 years of my life to this man. You got yachts, vacations, diamonds, influence, and you want more." Adriana's voice trembled, not with fear, but fury. "You knew he was married. You knew I was pregnant. And you still went on a baby moon with him while I was in the hospital." Cassie opened her mouth, but no words came. "I won't let you hurt my daughter." Adriana continued her hand protectively over her belly. "And I won't let you manipulate him anymore. Leave, or I'll call security, and make this very public." Cassie's mask cracked. Her mouth trembled as if she wanted to scream, but she turned to Charles instead. "You'll regret this. Both of you. I have everything, texts, photos, recordings. If you think I won't go to the press, think again." Adriana stepped forward, unflinching. "Do it. Sell your story. Air it all. Because unlike you, I've got nothing to hide. And the public's already tired of you." Cassie froze. Her lower lip quivered. "You lost, Adriana," said softer now. "And maybe it's time you let go." Charles remained silent through the entire exchange, watching as his past imploded right in front of him. He didn't move until Cassie turned, heels clicking sharply against the marble floor as she stormed toward the door. At the threshold, she hesitated for one last parting shot. "You're both pathetic," she spat. "Pretending this is some fairy tale redemption arc. He's going to screw it up again, you know." Adriana met her eyes calmly. "Maybe. But at least I'll have tried. Can you say the same?" Cassie slammed the door behind her and vanished down the steps. Adriana leaned against the wall, her breath shaky, her body trembling with adrenaline. Charles stepped toward her, arms half raised. "Don't," she said quietly. "Just give me a moment." He nodded and backed away, watching her with an expression that bordered on awe. Adriana had faced down the woman who nearly ruined her marriage, and she hadn't flinched. There was a strength in her he had never fully seen before, an inner fire that no scandal, no betrayal could extinguish. That night, as rain began to fall softly against the windows, they sat in the living room without words. The television flickered with muted commercials. A candle flickered on the coffee table, casting long shadows. "I didn't think she'd come here," Charles finally said, his voice hoarse. "I never wanted you to have to see her again." Adriana didn't look at him. "She didn't break this, Charles. You did?" "I know. She just reminded me of how far we'd fallen." Silence. "I meant what I said," he whispered. "I won't let anyone hurt you or the baby again. Not her, not me, not anyone." Adriana turned to him at last. "She's not the threat anymore. The real danger is pretending like we can patch this up without doing the work." Charles nodded. "I'm ready to do the work." "Then prove it," she said. "Not with gifts, with consistency, with time." He agreed, and this time he meant it. In the days that followed, Cassie attempted to sell her side of the story to a handful of gossip outlets, only to find interest had cooled. The market had moved on to newer scandals. Farnsworth Capital's PR team had done its job well, releasing a campaign focused on family values and ethical leadership under Helena Worth's guidance. The world simply wasn't listening anymore. Cassie faded from the headlines like yesterday's news. Meanwhile, Adriana's due date approached. The nursery was ready. The hospital bags packed. Usawazaki was packed, and one rainy morning as dawn broke across the bay, her water broke. Charles didn't panic this time. He rushed her to the hospital with care, holding her hand through every contraction. Hours passed. Pain pressure, and finally life. Sophia Lee Farnsworth arrived at 6:42 a.m., swaddled in soft pink and screaming her lungs out. The sound brought tears to both parents' eyes. Charles held her gently, terrified and awestruck. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She's everything." Adriana lay exhausted, but glowing. "She's ours." Charles kissed Sophia's forehead, then looked at Adriana with reverence. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me another chance. For giving us another chance." Adriana smiled, tired but serene. "Don't waste it." And in that sterile, warm-lit hospital room, surrounded by beeping monitors and the smell of new beginnings, the past seemed to recede just enough for the future to begin. In the end, life rarely offers perfect resolutions. It simply grants us new beginnings and second chances. Charles and Adriana found themselves walking a tighter rope of trust, determined to build a future for their daughter Sophia that was free from the heartbreak of the past. The mansion in Pacific Heights became a home once more filled with the sweet cries of a newborn and cautious but growing hope. Farnsworth Capital rebounded under new leadership, and Charles returned in a smaller capacity, learning that humility and ethics could coexist with ambition. Thank you for immersing yourself in this story of betrayal, heartbreak, and redemption. If you found the twists and turns captivating, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Every click and comment helps us bring you more dramatic tales that illuminate the human experience. Until next time, stay tuned for more real-life drama, and remember that sometimes a single choice can change everything.